Hi there, Chris from Stone Age Gamer here, and welcome back to the gratuitous Rainbow Spectrum, where it is once again time for a 16-bit brawl. If you were a dinosaur fan back in the 90s, chances are you were a big fan of Jurassic Park. And if you were also a video game fan, you probably played one of these. The Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis had two vastly different versions of Jurassic Park on their systems. Which system had the better game? Let's find out. There weren't many multimedia properties in the early 90s bigger than Jurassic Park. The movie was a smash hit, the book it was based on sold a bajillion copies, and before you knew it, it was patented, packaged, and slapped on a plastic lunchbox. Movie quotes aside, Jurassic Park was everywhere, and that obviously included video games. A few episodes ago, we looked at another popular 90s property, Aladdin. That was adapted into two pretty different video games for Sega Genesis and Super NES. But Jurassic Park is going to be even tougher because holy cow, these two games are vastly different. Also similar to Aladdin, most people's gut reaction to this question is typically to say that the Sega Genesis game was superior, and this again has a lot to do with nostalgia and popularity. This was Jurassic Park, so both games were pretty dang successful, but Sega advertised the ever-loving heck out of their Jurassic Park game, and to my knowledge it was undoubtedly the more popular of the two. It was developed by Blue Sky Software and was published by Sega themselves in 1993. It featured a sort of digitized look that took its visual inspiration directly from the movie. It also famously let you play as the Raptor if you wanted to, which is awesome no matter how you slice it. Meanwhile, over on the Super NES, Jurassic Park was also released in 1993, but this one was developed and published by Ocean. It was a wildly ambitious game, taking players through a much more colorful top-down world with its first-person shooter segments that you could actually control with a Super NES mouse if you wanted to. It was a pretty successful game, but without Nintendo shouting about its existence from the rooftops the way Sega did with their Jurassic Park game, it sort of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. Both platforms also had sequels made. In fact, the Genesis has a Lost World game as well that coincidentally has much more in common with the first Super Nintendo game than the first Genesis game, but that's neither here nor there. Today, we're comparing each platform's first Jurassic Park title. So let's get to work. Now that we've taken a closer look at the combatants, let's see how they fare. It's time for a 16-bit brawl. This is a hard category because neither game looks particularly bad. Well, that really depends on what you're looking at, but that's the case with both versions. The Super NES game plays out from two different perspectives, overhead and first person. The visuals are very video gamey, if that makes sense. It's colorful, and all the dinosaurs have very clearly defined video game sprites. This lends the game a sharp and well-animated look for the overhead segments. In the first-person segments, though, the visuals kind of fall apart. Since this was the Super NES and not a more modern platform more well-suited for 3D gaming, things are naturally extremely pixelated, and the frame rate chugs along in slideshow territory at all times. It's really quite cool and very impressive for its time, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. The Genesis game, though, has a very impressive digitized look. Grant looks like Grant from the movie, but more importantly, the dinosaurs look like the dinosaurs from the movie. The environments are super cool too, especially the jungle the first stage takes place in. The only real drawback is some of the animations are really choppy, especially the T-Rex. Still, when looking at these games side by side, I think it's clear that the Genesis has the advantage, overly pixelated graphics aside. The Super NES is still impressive, but the Sega Genesis, I think, here is the winner. This category, on the other hand, is pretty heavily favored toward the Super NES. The Sega Genesis version has some neat tunes, I guess, but the vast majority of its soundtrack is mired in that trademark Genesis fart noise category. Some of the dinosaur sounds are really quite good, and the T-Rex that says Sega when you power up the game is undeniably cool. But all in all, the game fails to do much good in the sound department. The Super NES, though, sounds fantastic. The sound effects are very cool, and the environmental sound design is excellent in the first-person segments, but the actual soundtrack absolutely rules. It does have this habit of starting and stopping rather abruptly when you move from location to location, and there could be more variety, but in a side-by-side comparison, this really isn't much of a contest. Neither is a perfect audio score, but the Super NES definitely comes out on top here. And now the tiebreaker, the all-important gameplay category that's worth 2 points. And we have, well, Alright, let's start with the Genesis game. It's a side-scrolling action platform with some fun alternative segments. You can ride in a boat, you can climb ladders, and push crates and equip a number of weapons. It's all great on paper, but the controls are just dreadful. Thankfully, this was addressed in the sequel, but unfortunately, that's not the game in the competition this time around. Controlling Grant in this game is an absolute chore, and the frustrating level design doesn't help matters either. Of course, its saving grace is the fact that there are two entirely different campaigns, one for Grant and one for the Raptor. Playing as the Raptor is awesome. It moves with a real sense of weight, and eating copies to restore health is a joy. Sadly, the controls are not much better here, which means that when the novelty of playing as the Raptor wears off, you're left with a game that's frustratingly difficult to play, and not in a good way. So with all that being said, you'd think the Super NES game would be a shoo-in for the win, right? Well, not so fast. At its core, the Super NES does have the Genesis beat thanks to its solid controls. However, it has its own troubles that bog it down pretty hard. The first-person segments can be brutally sluggish, and the whole fetch quest aspect of tracking down raptor eggs is very difficult without a proper in-game map. The biggest tragedy of Jurassic Park for Super NES, though, is the lack of any kind of save or password feature. If you're going to finish this game, it's going to have to be in a single sitting, which is no easy task. This game can get very tough, and it certainly isn't short, especially your first time through. It's never quite as frustrating as the Genesis game when it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, but the act of actually figuring this game out from beginning to end is beyond daunting, and it can become very not fun very quickly. Then we have the overall presentation. The Genesis game has actual cutscenes. The Super NES game's ending is just the title screen in reverse, and considering how much work it takes to get there, it's pretty frustrating. Both games have their highs and lows, and while they're for incredibly different reasons, I think they ultimately cancel each other out. I'm sorry, but this category is a tie. And there you have it, folks. This one's a draw. Neither one of these games is a genuine masterpiece, but they're both equally good, too. Super NES takes it on sound, Genesis does great on graphics, but the games themselves, I think, are equally awesome and flawed. So no matter which flavor you decide to play, the overall experience is going to be similar, depending on your personal taste, that is. This contest is a tie. Well, there you have it. That is what I think of the Jurassic Park games for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and yes, I think it's a tie. They're both very unique games, but they're also very uniquely flawed. So, it was a wash. Either way, this is just my opinion. I cannot stress that enough. This is not a scientific, this is the way it is. This is my opinion. What is your opinion? Let us know. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like what you saw here today, please follow, comment, like, subscribe, share, and like I said, let us know what you think. Did I undersell the music in the Sega Genesis Jurassic Park game? Is it actually a masterpiece that I just can't hear? Is playing as the Raptor so cool that it makes up for all the broken controls? Is the Super Nintendo game's first-person segment so awesome that it doesn't matter that it's, well, basically a slideshow? Let us know. I love hearing what everybody thinks. Thanks again for watching. On behalf of all of us here at Stone Age Gamer, keep playing games.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Oh no. Oh no! Ah!